รับการสัมมนาในหัวข้อต่อไปนะคะ Sustainable City by Using Smart Solution ค่ะในระหว่างที่ทุกท่านรับชมการสัมมนานะคะสามารถส่งคำถามมาได้ในช่อง Q&A ในช่วงท้ายค่ะวิทยากรจะมาตอบคำถามของทุกท่านและสำหรับในหัวข้อต่อไปนะคะดิฉันขออนุญาตกล่าวแนะนำเป็นภาษาอังกฤษเพื่อต้อนรับวิทยากรชาวต่างชาติค่ะ We are honored to welcome another global expert who will be lecturing on this session Sustainable City by Using Smart Solution Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Jonas Trnblom, CEO and Retail AB Sweden.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. My name is Jonas Törnblom, and I've been working in the international environment industry since the late 1980s, and with environmental infrastructure in urban development since over 20 years. And I've been working in projects both in Europe and in Asia and in North America. It's always fascinated me why the rapid development of science, on the one hand, is not matched by a similar development in our abilities to find common solutions to complex problems, on the other. Why don't we see the same progress when it comes to our abilities to relate to each other, in particular the handling of complex problems that are rooted in our relationship with each other? So last year, I initiated the development of Stockholm Center of Governance, a national knowledge center for the governance of complex transactional processes of change. Today, based on the work we are involved in at the Stockholm Center of Governance and my own experience with urban development workshops, I will talk about the importance of governance in developing sustainable cities. I will also talk about the opportunities of smart technology in sustainable urban development if we can provide the right project governance. Throughout history, human progress has been made possible through the invention of things. There are some examples of mankind's greatest, these are some examples of mankind's greatest inventions according to Sky history. The resolution or improvement of many of our societal challenges, such as famine, disease, food security, bad weather, illiteracy, etc., have been closely linked to new product development. One can say that society's value creation has been a result of the production and distribution of things. So here we see the wheel, powder, textiles, vaccine. This is pigments, telescope, steam engine, aqueducts, an aqueduct, the printing press, and satellite. These are the, according to Sky history, these are the greatest inventions of mankind. Of course, there are many similar ratings, but this is an example. The rapid technology development in the last decade is not new to anyone. But what is different now is that value creation is more based on human behavior than previous production of things. There are some examples of companies that created huge value on the business idea of accumulating, processing, and using data on human behavior. They're all familiar to you. But it's not only technology development that is changing our world. We also see how our challenges get more and more complex. These are some examples of complex societal challenges: political and religious extremism, climate change, mental illness, urban environment, and pandemics. Common characteristics for these challenges are: 1, we lack efficient tools and processes to handle them. 2, they're not confined to a organizational or territorial border. And 3, they're all consequences of human behavior. These challenges are characterized by being highly complex, often ill-defined and interdisciplinary, contradictory with diverging interests, spanning multiple domains: social, economic, political, environmental, legal, and ethical, and they're often even changing in their nature. So, as I said, they cannot be resolved by one institution. There are no quick fixes by one technology, but they require holistic approaches and new forms of cooperation, organization, leadership, and business models across borders and across organizational and national cultural borders. That is, we need new forms of governance in order to handle these complex challenges. But our ability to tackle these challenges is restrained by outdated ideas and tools. The challenges rarely fit our institutional maps. Despite this, we still try to fit complex challenges to vertical silo structures using linear processes to deal with them. As a friend of mine put it, silo structures and linear processes are excellent at getting things done, but they're equally excellent at not getting things done at all. So what makes a complex process different from a traditional linear process? Well, first of all, often we lack causality. That is, we don't know if an action A would lead to an expected result B. And even if it does, we don't know if this result is repeatable, if we can translate that to another project. Secondly, we lack what we call locus of control. Locus of control is the obvious ownership of the issue, or it can be several ownerships. It can be financial, organizational, etc. Types of ownerships and leaderships. Thirdly, lack of process understanding and process competences. We don't know how to go about solving these complex issues, and we don't know if we have the right competences for it. And fourthly, we lack predictability. They lack predictability. So even if we have the resources and we know what to do, etc., we often hesitate because we cannot foresee the consequences. One good example of this is climate change. The easiest way to reduce fossil fuel consumption in the world would be to raise CO2 taxes. And this has been proven in some countries to be very efficient. But still, most countries hesitate because they cannot foresee the consequences on their economies, etc. So predictability is a major factor which is impacting our ability to handle complex problems. Take online shopping as another example. Did anyone at Amazon consider the effects on congestion as they explore their business idea? If not, why not? And if so, did they care about it? Or for that sake, Uber or Lyft. These are unexpected consequences, and who should be responsible for those when we develop and explore our business ideas? It's clear that even as innovations bring unprecedented comfort and convenience, they also have negative side effects. We could argue that this has always been the case, but what is different now is that it happens so fast, with so far-reaching consequences, and embedded in such complexity. So the question is, how can we promote new technology in urban development and at the same time minimize and eliminate their possible negative consequences? As one person put it, technology is the answer, but what was the question? These are UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they have 169 sub-goals too. Common for all these goals are that they cannot be solved by one institution alone, nor with one technology. This means that we can only reach them with systemic collaborative solutions. One of our largest needs for the future is to create more resource-efficient cities. Water is a scarce resource in many parts of the world. Could we reduce our need for fresh water and at the same time reduce our dependence on fossil energy? Yes, that is possible through cross-sectional collaboration. I'll give you one example. Wastewater treatment is today standard in all cities in the world, cleaning wastewater from industry and households. Now, we also have so good cleaning technologies that we convert the treated wastewater into drinking water quality. This means that the wastewater treatment plant becomes a producer of fresh water. We can also treat the the biosolids coming out of the wastewater treatment process and make them into biogas. And the biogas could be used for example, public transportation, in this case, public buses. And the biosolids, what comes out of this process can be used as fertilizers. So now the wastewater treatment plant is producing fuels, energy and fuels, and fertilizers. And we could use the heat and the cold coming out of these processes for buildings to heat and cool buildings. So we have a heating facility too. So this is a completely new way of using our resources and enlarging the business scope of traditional municipal companies. But this is only possible through governance of and collaboration across borders. We can see here that we meet several of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals with these type of collaborations. This is another example. It's the city of Norrköping, about 1.5 hours south of Stockholm. On the upper left-hand side, you see the same process of treating wastewater, converting it to energy, and leading the energy as biogas back to the city for public transportation. But also what is connected here is solid waste from both households and industry, which is incinerated in the middle of the picture. And out of this incineration process comes both electricity and heat for district heating. But also steam is generated in this process, excess steam, which is used by a local ethanol plant, which works on pharmaceutical, on grains from farms and waste from the food industry in the city. And this ethanol plant that produces ethanol of very high quality, which is exported, and out of the ethanol process comes CO2, which is used by a local chemical plant. On the right-hand side of the picture, you see the forest industry, the forest and pulp industry, you see other industries also connected to the same loop. And this is done, this was all possible through governance of different stakeholders, different actors. Management of behavior is very complex. The traditional linear and vertical management methods don't work very well on complex cross-sectional issues. But complex challenges leaves at the same time a lot of opportunities for innovations. The examples I just mentioned on complex cooperation with several stakeholders with different objectives and agendas were united around common needs and willingness to cooperate to find better solutions for society. So how could this be achieved on a larger scale? That's what I'm going to discuss next. We see that many of our goals for urban development that we establish are, we try to draw up standards for example, LEED and BREEAM. And this is what we try to head for. But equally important is to consider what is the conditions for realizing these objectives. Below the top of the iceberg, we have a whole range of conflicting structures and cultures, which are essential to develop governance processes to be able to manage. So, how often do we hear of governance, of international standards for governance processes of these conflicting interests, for example? This is something we need to be much better at also sharing experience from project to project. In order to tackle a complex problem, we need to reduce its complexity, and we need to do it together with all parties concerned. We need to find new ways to reach mutually beneficial goals, and we need to establish structures to govern these processes. And these structures should make creativity, innovation, cooperation, and the exploration of synergies possible. And this is what we call in Sweden, we call eco-governance. And eco-governance is a process which brings the different stakeholders to see the situation from the periphery, to distance themselves from their perspectives as companies or institutions, to define the future that everyone wants to be part of, to build friends, trust, and engagement in the process, to focus on synergies, solving problems, and making things happen, and enable innovative ideas to emerge and to be explored. The eco-governance process is split into different steps. The first step is, together with the main stakeholders, agree on the landscape, situation, problems, needs, and challenges. What would be your desired future? This is a very important step in order to get alignment on the issue that we are trying to approach. Secondly, we should define the opportunities for transformative change in order to solve the problem. Develop a what if, a what could be attitude, but also what could be the greater value in making use of the opportunities for these challenges. Thirdly, understanding the roles and motivations and purpose of the stakeholders. Very important. Which are the main drivers and influencers behind the stakeholders and impacting the change? Then, based on these three steps, we could develop a vision including all stakeholders and their drivers and limitations and etc. Fifthly, we should discuss which factors are of crucial success for the project. And then we often recommend to get involved into a benchmarking process where you invite different actors outside of the project, other city projects, other experts to explain what are the best practices, and also even try to understand how the best practices developed, what were the conditions for their success, what experiences did they make that could be relevant for us, and how could their conditions and processes be translated into our situation. 7, develop and agree on common, realistic, but stretched objectives, roles, and responsibilities. 8, develop individual objectives, value propositions, and key performance indicators. This is very important in order to make the cooperation robust over time. So you need to be able to protect the engagement of all stakeholders in the process over time. So they need to be able to argue for, in their organizations, why they are participating. Develop a platform for coordination. Appoint a chairperson and a coordination committee. The chairperson should lead and coordinate the meetings, steer the process towards the vision and common objectives, mitigate conflicts of interest, and inject energy into the team and the project. Agree on a joint reporting structure, budgets, and a communication plan. How should we communicate the vision? How can we continuously inform and involve the target groups? How should we communicate this to outside stakeholders? And then we need to challenge the plan, to ask ourselves, if something goes wrong, what could go wrong? We could use gaming exercises, simulations, forecasting, backcasting, FMEAs, etc. And we've gone through all this. We normally recommend to sign a protocol, all stakeholders signing a protocol, committing to the vision and objectives, and this, of course, needs to be sanctioned by their superiors. And then we could go ahead, start working. The crucial question for the collaboration is, what can the stakeholders get out of their engagement? At Stockholm Center of Governance, we have developed a framework to better understand stakeholders' motivation and ability to engage in and contribute to the common cause. We call it the stakeholder exchange ratio model. The model shows the ratio between what a stakeholder may gain financially, prestigiously, socially, etc., and the alternative costs for engaging or not engaging in a particular transformation endeavor. We have on the two axes here, we have the ability for each stakeholder to contribute to a solution, and on the x-axis, the attention or priority versus other issues that this stakeholder has. So we can plot here the stakeholders. Take, for example, if we have the challenge to introduce a sustainable waste management scheme. The waste collectors and the recycling companies, they are very much involved in this since they can impact the sustainability, and they have this as a top priority every day. We can see, for example, that a street cleaner has not the possibility to impact the sustainability in the same way as a waste collecting company or recycling company, but they deal with the issues every day of collecting waste. Politicians have possibilities to impact the solution, but they have many other things that they have to deal with too, so which means that it may be a medium priority to them. Producers of things, of course, they can impact the quantities and the composition of the waste which is put on the market, but they also have other interests that they have to deal with. So they have a high possibility to impact the waste management situation, but they have perhaps only medium interest in doing that. Households deal with waste every day and have some impact on the sustainability, perhaps. The same with commercial users, building owners, lower possibilities to impact, but to a certain extent they can get people, they have an interest in having a sustainable waste handling and management situation. Otherwise, the property value will go down if you see waste everywhere in the neighborhood. Developer investors can, through their investments, promote sustainable solutions. Schools, very important. They can influence children that in turn can influence their parents to sort waste in a better way. So this is a way to plot the interests and the possibilities of different stakeholders to impact the situation. Ideally, we would like to have as many actors as possible as far up in the right-hand corner as possible, because then they have both the ability to impact and they have the commitment to do it based on their duties and their closeness to the problem. Here you can also play with the questions. You can redefine the questions in order to get more stakeholders into the right-hand boxes, but you could also play with the perspective. If you say, for example, the closer you get to the issue, or from an organizational point of view, the greater probably are the possibilities that you move up to the right-hand corner. If you have a national institution, you may not be so engaged as you would be if you have the local school or the local building owner, etc. So if the more you can move up to the right-hand corner, the stakeholders can move there, the better the chances would be for a collaborative, sustainable approach. As I showed you before, this is a good example on how local cooperation is possible. Whereas if you would start to approach these actors by their head office, international head or national head office, they will probably be less prone to collaborate. So by focusing on a particular local issue, it's typically much easier to get the stakeholders committed than approaching the national organization or international organizations. In order to coordinate these processes with multiple actors and interests, new simulation and visualization technologies could be very useful. More and more cities develop digital twins which allow for realistic scenario developments. Here, you can simulate and visualize effects of technology introduction or climate change, traffic development, etc. And this is a very powerful tool for the assessment of consequences and to develop synergies between stakeholders. You have a platform which everybody could relate to and discuss around in order to see where could we find synergies, where could we cooperate, and what would be the consequences if we do this for other actors involved in the project. Smart technology has a huge potential for improving sustainability, but technology is always the tool, not the objective. Many urban development projects have difficulties in applying holistic and unifying approaches. I often hear that special stakeholders' interests are incompatible and that it is difficult to unify around common interests. Instead, many projects try to look for standards and rating systems that could be used, like LEED or BREEAM. These systems certainly have merits, but they can also easily lead to sub-optimizations, create obstacles for innovation, and hinder the development of synergetic cooperations. Instead, I recommend to use these standards as reference and templates for evaluations, once you have been able to unify the stakeholders around a common vision. The eco-governance process has proven to be a good way to address the issues discussed above and to realize the opportunities smart technologies provide to modern society's path towards sustainability. Only through a systemic approach, understanding all stakeholders' perspectives and unifying the actors around the greater common needs, can we create room for innovative, smart, and sustainable development. It's not a simple process, and it takes special leadership skills, but it's the only way to create a basis to unleash technology development to help us come to grips with our challenges through human behavior. Thank you very much. There's more information about the initiative on www.schoolofgovernance.se. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas, for sharing us the very in-depth knowledge. And now we have the questions from the audience. Kunanisha, what is the question for our speaker?
Well, yes, our questions is, Professor Törnblom, could you please share us about the actual success project, particularly in any developing country, if any, and also the results from the city governance process? What is it about? Can you tell us?
Can you repeat the question, please?
The success project that you have been implemented in, for example, in developing country. Can you please share us?
Yes, I've been working in China. There's one project in China which I've been working quite closely with in the Shandong province in a city called Yantai, where a lot of these aspects are being applied. There are also many other projects in China that try to follow these aspects. There is one which was early developed in Tianjin, the Sino-Singapore Eco City in Tianjin, which took a lot of pressures out of this.
Yeah.
There are not so many projects that are managed this way, unfortunately, not even in Sweden. And the problem here is that it's much easier to split the responsibility up on the different actors in traditional silo structures, rather than unifying across borders in order to reach common goals. The best example, one of the best examples of how this has been realized in the world is a project in Stockholm called Hammarby, which has been visited by hundreds of thousands of people since the beginning of year 2000. And here, this process was developed where the city took the leadership and established a common vision to reduce the environmental impact by 50%. And they did it because Stockholm wanted to have the Olympic Games of year 2000. and Stockholm didn't get the games, but they still managed to hold on to the vision, and all the stakeholders were engaged in the process of trying to meet the goals of reducing the environmental impact by 50%. So it's possible, but it's not an easy process, but it's necessary to do in order to avoid sub-optimizations and technologies and developments which are not really what you would like to have.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trnblom, for sharing us. Thank you very much.
เรายังมีหัวข้อการสัมมนาอีก 2 หัวข้อค่ะที่รอทุกท่านอยู่ค่ะแต่ว่าตอนนี้ค่ะเราพักกันสักครู่นะคะแล้วกลับมาพบกันค่ะในเวลา 13:35 น.กับงาน Sustainability Forum 2020 ค่ะ